Yeah, here's some theories on why the price drop.
All right, here's the first one.
It says, I asked some of my contacts what's behind the price drops. I got mixed replies, from Nikon having better access to materials, manufacturing, becoming cheaper, etc. But regardless, Nikon is swinging.
Yeah, and then here's the next one.
Nikon is clearly aiming for legacy, which is good for all of us.
So I actually have a very similar theory, I think, to Cam.
Mm-hmm.
So when I went to Cinegear, I had the privilege of going to Red's their factory, where they assemble the actual cameras. Now, I learned a lot, right? There's certain things they could tell me, certain things they couldn't tell me. But one thing that I saw that was really interesting was like they kind of were talking to me a little bit about like the process of like getting sensors, right? So like for everyone out there, just so you know, like when a company buys a sensor, it actually shows up on like a circle, like a disc, almost looks like a frisbee, like a super thin frisbee. And we all know that sensors, most sensors, are square or rectangle, or like depending on if it's a 1-inch sensor versus a VistaVision sensor, that size of that rectangle changes. But here's the crazy part. The size of the circle is always the same, right? So if you can imagine, if you have this circle, you can fit way more iPhone sensors on that circle than you can VistaVision sensors. And so when any company needs a camera, they have to buy these sensor discs. And here is the insane part. I never thought about how many people needed sensors, because when you think about Ford, right? Like I drive a Bronco and there are cameras all over my deal, right? Or a Tesla that has tons of cameras everywhere. Each one of those cameras needs a sensor. So Tesla is ordering these sensor circle things, and Nikon is ordering these sensor circle things. Ford, security cameras. Everywhere you see a camera, ATMs, they're
webcams.
All of them are ordering these sensors. So when you think about a company like Red having to put in an order by themselves versus Ford or versus Tesla, they're a very small player. And so this is no information coming from Red or anything. This is just my theory. If you can imagine, since Nikon now comes in, Red needs sensors, Nikon needs sensors, they could probably put in their order together and get a much better price. And so for those people who are like, were the Reds always overpriced by $3,000? I don't think that was the case. I legitimately think we are seeing the benefits of a bigger company like Nikon acquiring a smaller brand like Red, and not only seeing that like, oh, this changes supply chain, but the truth is that this could have changed supply chain, and they could have just kept selling the Reds at the same price. But I think, to Cam's point, I think what's happening here, and this is Brandon contemplating, but I think what's happening here is we are seeing Red and Nikon saying, okay, we can save money on the manufacturing. Let's pass those savings on to our new and future users, right? And let's build a solid brand connection with them and pass those savings off to them. Get in some good standings, right? Because let's face it, anybody who was in the market for a Komodo X already, you can save $3,000. Bro, you're happy now, right? Get into some good standings with them. But also, we can get our cameras in more hands. More people are actually going to be able to now afford our cameras because we've made them more price effective. And now we can get more users, get more feedback, and really build up that name. So I do understand, like I said, with every pro, there's a con. Yes, the used market is going to take a hit on this. But for everybody who's now ready to enter into the Red world, dude, I think this is a huge win for those people. And we're seeing those savings being passed on to us.
100%. When you think about literally Nikon's status in the world of videography film a year ago, you guys know what y'all were saying about Nikon. Y'all know that people, like, literally when they were thinking about Nikon rumors or they were talking about what's coming up, people weren't talking about Nikon. Literally this year, we can't say Nikon enough. Like they are just making wave after wave after wave. And absolutely, I do think that for the legacy part of it, I think that they are being so aggressive, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, Scott, in case I misspoke. I don't think I did, but I made a misspoke here. Yeah, I'm not saying that Red can put in their order with Ford. What I'm saying is those other brands are putting in orders in bulk, right? And I'm not sure about this number, but I think there's only like 3 companies in the world that actually make sensors. And so when you get an order, like if you're one of those 3 companies, if Ford sends you an order, you're probably going to process the Ford order much faster because they're ordering way more sensors than what Red is probably ordering in comparison. And so that's the point that I was making. It has nothing to do with like, Ford and Red can order at the same time. They can't. But Nikon can now put in orders, and those orders can now be sold in bulk with the Red since it's all one company. Now, granted, the discs are not the same. You're not going to put a Nikon Z8 sensor on the same disc as a Red disc, but because one company is putting in the order and you're ordering so many sensors in bulk, the pricing becomes more affordable. And I think that's why they can pass those savings on to us. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you, Scott, for fact checking me there. Appreciate it. But yeah, dude, I am super excited about this. Let's go into the chat really quick because I know there was some pretty good ones. So let's find a couple in here. If you see one that stands out, let me know.
Yes. Oh, look at that. DM Colorist says, go up a few more. He says, go with the Monstro. Can pick up a Monstro kit for similar price as kitted with the new KX.
You know, that's interesting. I didn't think about that, but I'm sure. I mean, obviously, I figured the Shockwaves or the OG Komodo, but like Monstro sensors Monstro packages are probably pretty affordable right now too.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you could easily step into the. I'm gonna say easily. That's the wrong word. I got to be careful what I say.
Yeah.
But you could step into the world of Red right now in a easier manner than you could 5 years ago, 4 years ago.
Well, we were talking about this before. Marquez Brownlee, like literally watching him while he's like a little baby, like literally unbox his first Red camera. And I remember thinking then, that is when my heart was sold to Red. Like one day I want to own a Red camera just like he owned a Red camera. But like those being like $45,000 back in the day, like it's like, I don't know what. Thankfully, I had that dream in my youth because had I had that dream when I was a full adult, I'd be like, yeah, I ain't never owning that. And so it just planted a seed. And so now, man, a $7,000 KX. Yeah. And the Monstros and all sorts of stuff. That is really cool.
All right. Here's one from Gustavo. Let's pull this one up. I'll let you read that one.
He says, here's something I'm not seeing at all online. How's the Komodo X and the RF Canon glass when it comes to autofocus? Yeah, that's a question. Heard they came out of beta, but it's a huge factor as a solo shooter.
You know, I've seen this question a lot, and actually on my Instagram, I ask people, what questions do you have when it comes to being as a non-Red owner? And the autofocus is a big one. So I can say I come from an era of Red where there was no autofocus. And then getting into the Komodo and then eventually the Raptor and even Komodo X, autofocus being in beta. But it's very odd because I saw the Komodo X come out and I helped, with the launch video that Red even posted. And we had tested the autofocus in that video and were pleasantly surprised. But the autofocus, it wasn't like face tracking or anything. Like it was just like locked autofocus. You could put a box, and we tried to cheat it by like holding the phone and dragging the box around in order to keep the autofocus. And like surprisingly that worked.
Yeah.
Which was insane. And then recently, I say recently, 5-ish, 6-ish months maybe, the Komodo X got an update that now has face tracking autofocus. So I'll be very honest here. Is it Sony quality or Canon quality autofocus? No, it's not.
How far off? If you had to, if not that Sony or Canon's a 10, but if we're putting them at a 10, where would you?
I would put this somewhere close to back in the day, we were always happy with Canon DSLR autofocus, right? That's where I would probably put this. Somewhere around there. What? It's just that with mirrorless cameras, autofocus has gotten ridiculous. Eye tracking and all that.
You brought me back to my 1DX Mark II days, and literally like the because I feel you, bro. I was on that face tracking deal, and like I was like, yeah, this is cool, until I stepped up to mirrorless and was like,
and that's the thing.
Dang.
Mirrorless made a huge jump. With eye autofocus and everything else, and like pets and planes and like all this. So like, no, we're not there.
Okay.
On the Raptor or Komodo X or OG Komodo for that matter. But here's the thing. I have never seen a camera flat out not have a feature like that and then get it.
Well, it's a supercomputer.
But that's it. That's what I'm saying. So if I'm a betting man, I have more trust that if it is possible to get this camera to that level, if there was a camera brand, an existing camera that they're not going to just release another one and make you buy that next one, I believe that the actual red existing Komodo X could get a software update that could give you better autofocus than what it currently has today. Because I've seen a big jump already. And then the other thing that a lot of people don't know or don't talk about is that there is something called the Red Control Pro app, right? So it's a pro app that you download on your iPad and your iPhone. And here's the wild thing about it. Face tracking autofocus was on that app before it ever made it to the actual camera, which is nuts. And I found out by accident because Red didn't announce it.
Were they like testing it, or like they?
I don't really know. Like, this is one feedback that I've given to Red multiple times. Like, they don't share all of the things that make their cameras great well enough. And like, I get it. They trust like people like me and other creators who love their cameras to talk about them openly and share those things. But like, coming from the company, that would help a lot. But like, I was literally playing on my Control Pro app, and I'm like messing around with like, oh, can I autofocus from this app? And I noticed it was like tracking my face. I was like, what the heck? It can do this? Red never told me this. And I figured it out. Now, if I go into the camera couldn't turn it on. It only was happening from the app itself. And so this is where things got really, interesting and pretty cool, which then later on that feature made it over to the actual computer.
That's cool.
And so like, we've seen stuff like that already. Like, the Pro app right now has a gyroscope that can actually tell you if your camera is level or not. That's not on the actual camera. It's only in the Pro app. So like, Red is constantly, and their engineers are constantly doing things to make their cameras better, to where I personally feel like if a camera could get a upgrade to get it to as good as Sony, it could be the Komodo X. The only thing that holds me back from really being able to push all my chips in on that is the fact that Nikon bought them. And I don't know how nice Nikon and Canon are going to play together, because when we talk about Sony autofocus or we talk about Canon autofocus, it's always Canon body, RF Canon lens,
native
or
glass.
Sony body, native Sony lens. And even when we start talking about throwing Sigmas on there and throwing Tamarons on there, it's always, well, how much of the autofocus am I going to sacrifice, right? Well, now we have a Red, but a Nikon body, and we have a Canon lens. And it's not 100% native, and the engineers are not working hand in hand. And so I think we will always see a slight limitation there. But if there is a day that we get a Z-mounted Red camera, I think that's when we're going to start to see full autofocus unlocked. Hey, thanks so much for checking out the Uncensored channel. Do us a huge favor. If you enjoy this content, hit that subscribe button. We'd love for you to join us live every single Friday at 11 o'clock Central Standard Time. We have so much fun, and we want you to be there. So subscribe so you don't miss it.